Hi, I'm CEO Jack Fiala, and my group is CTO Ryan Devine, CIO Brian Vance, and HR Brendan Hewitt. My group is presenting on biofuels and whether or not they're sustainable for the future in the United States. Starting off, we're going to show a basic video on what biofuels are.
We all need fuel to get around, and as America takes steps to improve our energy security, homegrown fuel sources are more important than ever. The Energy Department is researching one of the fuel sources of the future found here in algae. Have a look at this algae farm. These large man-made ponds are called raceways, and they cultivate a new crop of algae every few weeks. You see, algae, or more correctly, microalgae, are very small aquatic organisms that convert sunlight into energy. Some of these algae store energy in the form of natural oils. Under the right conditions, algae can make a lot of oil that can be converted into biofuels. Algae could potentially produce up to 60 times more oil per acre than land-based plants. Extract that oil, and you have the raw materials to make fuel for cars, trucks, trains, and planes. In the future, anything that runs on gasoline and diesel could also use biofuel from algae. The oil is extracted by breaking down the cell structure of the algae. This can be done by using solvents or sound waves. After the oil is extracted, then it is further processed at an integrated biorefinery, or in the future, at a traditional oil refinery. Another great benefit of algae? Consider this. Like plants, algae needs carbon dioxide to grow, and that's good for the environment since it takes CO2 out of the atmosphere, making it a nearly carbon-neutral fuel source. There may even be opportunities to build algae farms next to power plants that use fossil fuels, actually using CO2 exhaust to feed algae ponds. There are over 100,000 different strains of algae. Some grow better in different climates, or in freshwater, saltwater, or even wastewater. So, scientists are testing different algae under many different conditions to find the best strains and develop the most efficient farming practices. While commercial production is still a ways off, algae holds great promise to become a reliable homegrown fuel source to reduce our nation's reliance on foreign oil.
Hi, I'm Ryan Devine, CTO, and this is Brendan Hewitt, HR, and we're reporting on the basics of biofuels. The term algae refers to a great diversity of organisms from microscopic cyanobacteria to giant kelp, which convert sunlight into energy using photosynthesis like plants. There are over 100,000 genetically diverse strains of algae. This is an advantage for researchers who can harness algae strains' numerous unique properties to develop promising algal biofuels and bioproducts.
The key to algae's potential as a renewable fuel source lies in increasing algal biomass productivity per acre. Some researchers say algae could be 10 or even 100 times more productive than traditional bioenergy feedstocks. Achieving these high productivities in real-world systems is a key challenge to realizing the promise of sustainable and affordable algal biofuels. Once harvested, algae can be readily processed into raw material to make fuels for cars, trucks, trains, and planes.
Hi, I'm Brian Vance, and I'm here to talk about the positives of biofuels. While some people see global warming as a natural event, most scientists agree that fossil fuels such as oil and coal drive the temperature increase. When burned, fossil fuels release greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases trap radiation from the sun close to the surface of the planet, causing the planet to warm. To stem the release of greenhouse gas, people around the world are using biofuels, such as ethanol or biodiesel, to power their homes, cars, and factories. Some experts say that ethanol reduces greenhouse gas emission up to 65%. Scientists in Australia say biodiesel made from cooking oil reduces greenhouse gas emissions by 87% compared with petroleum diesel. Still, many people believe that growing and turning some energy crops, especially corn, into fuel uses a huge amount of fossil fuel, contributing to the release of heat-trapping gases. Another positive of biofuels is sustainability and availability. One day, the world will run out of fossil fuels, but biofuels are different. They're made from plants that can grow and be replaced again and again. Perennial crops don't even have to be replanted. Still, not all biofuels are created equal. Some energy crops produce more energy than others. For example, rapeseed has a higher oil content than other vegetable plants, which means rapeseed can generate more energy when burned. Perennial plants such as switchgrass provide an abundant source of power, generating 5 times as much energy as they take to grow. Another positive of biofuels are the health benefits. Each year in the United States, 10,000 people die from pollution created by gasoline engines. Among other irritants and pollutants, gasoline releases nitrogen oxide and other chemicals. These emissions make thousands of people sick every year with respiratory ailments and cancers. Biofuels discharge fewer toxins into the air than fossil fuels. When compared to conventional diesel, biodiesel reduces smog-forming particulate matter, which reduces cases of asthma and other respiratory illnesses. In addition, biodiesel doesn't emit any sulfur oxides and sulfates, which contribute to acid rain. For its part, ethanol generally burns better and more robustly than gasoline, generating less pollution. When compared with gasoline, an E85 fuel blend, 15% ethanol, 85% gasoline, burned in an efficient engine produces fewer toxins, including 40% less carbon dioxide, 20% less particulate matter, and 80% fewer sulfates. However, scientists at Stanford University in California say ethanol releases many of the same pollutants as gasoline. In addition, a large amount of unburned ethanol escapes into the air. Also, the use of biofuel reduces the dependence on foreign oil. In 1973, the oil-producing nations of the Middle East stopped exporting oil. Oil prices rose. Economies across the globe suffered. In the United States, people waited in line for hours to buy gasoline. The embargo was a wake-up call to the rest of the world. Governments scrambled to find new ways to deal with the emergency crisis. Eventually, the oil-producing countries lifted the embargo, but the thirst for oil around the world continued. Today, humans can consume 85 million barrels of oil per day. Americans use nearly 18.7 billion barrels a day. While growing sustainable energy crops at home will lessen the nation's reliance on foreign oil, most experts agree it will not save our energy woes in one blow. Instead, biofuel use, coupled with long and short-term solutions such as raising fuel economy standards for motor vehicles, enacting tax incentives for hybrids and fuel cell vehicles, and increasing the use of all renewable fuels will help the United States and the world wean itself off oil.
In addition to reducing dependence on foreign oil, many countries expect the biofuel industry to fuel economic development in poor rural areas. For example, experts at the International Food Policy Institute say in Tanzania, ethanol made from a shrub called cassava can help reduce poverty in that West African nation where 80% of the labor force is farmers. Closer to home, the biofuel industry can help local communities by providing well-paying jobs for individuals and economic development for municipalities. According to the Biotechnology Industry Organization, by 2022, the biofuel industry is expected to create 190,000 direct green jobs and 610,000 indirect jobs. When gas prices in the United States topped $4 a gallon in the summer of 2008, people became very concerned. Many drivers began thinking long and hard about buying alternative fuel-powered vehicles, including those that run on ethanol and biodiesel. For example, a flex fuel car that runs on both ethanol and gasoline gets about 40 miles to the gallon, according to the National Highway Transportation and Safety Administration. While fuel economy is one way to measure the economic benefits of biofuels, there are others. For instance, biodiesel production has had a positive impact on the economy. Biodiesel production in the United States increased from 500,000 gallons in 1999 to 545 million gallons in 2009, adding $4.28 billion to the gross domestic product. While biodiesel remains more expensive than regular diesel, consumers need to look beyond the cost per gallon to really gauge the economic benefits. Biodiesel vehicles get 30% better fuel economy than gasoline-powered vehicles. Biodiesel creates fewer emissions, including cancer-causing benzene, and it also produces less pollution by decreasing the amount of particles suspended in the air. Less pollution means lower healthcare costs. In addition, as biodiesel becomes more fuel efficient, many businesses that use diesel engines, especially the trucking industry, can see more profits by gassing up with the green fuel. The biofuel industry, with a layer of clean, homegrown, sustainable energy, has provided well-paid jobs for individuals and economic development for municipalities. In 2007, the ethanol industry alone created 240,000 jobs and added $47.6 billion to the nation's gross domestic product. While analysts disagree on the number of jobs the biofuel industry will create, several studies say the U.S. economy could add more than 1 million jobs in the next 2 decades. Using algae as a biofuel is also a benefit because it does not require the clearing of land to produce it. Also, algae can double its numbers in about 24 hours, which allows for a large amount of it to be reduced as well in small areas. They can grow in areas such as wastewater, making them efficient as it utilizes useless resources. On top of this, algae can also produce a significant amount more oil per acre than any other biofuel. Algae is also beneficial to the environment as it absorbs CO2 through photosynthesis, counteracting the CO2 produced by the process of making it.
These are the soybean farmers who grew the soybeans, that produced the oil, that was used to make the biodiesel, that went into fuel tanks all across America, which grew biodiesel demand, which increased to over 1 billion gallons a year, which supports more than 62,000 jobs that earn $2.6 billion a year, that is paid by the businesses that also pump $16.7 billion a year into the economy, which results in over $1.5 billion a year in tax revenue that goes into communities across America where the soybean farmers live. And that's how biodiesel works for America.
I'm Brennan Hewitt, and now I'm going to be talking about some of the disadvantages of biofuel. Using animal and human waste to power engines may save on carbon dioxide emissions, but it increases methane gases, which are also harmful to the Earth's ozone layer. So really, we are no better off environmentally for using one or the other. And speaking of using waste products, there is a smell to consider. While it is not physically harmful, it is definitely unpleasant, and it can attract unwanted pests such as rats and flies, and spread bacteria and infection. Another one is the risk of deforestation. Biomass energy sources are renewable, but they have to be utilized sustainably. Uncontrolled biomass production can result in deforestation. In fact, this is the main reason for slowing down the large-scale biomass tool. Governments feel replanting efforts may not match the rate of cutting down all the trees. Also, it requires a great amount of water. This is the most visible disadvantage of biomass fuel. All plant matter needs sufficient amount of water to get by. Meeting water sources must be abundant. If enough water is not available, irrigation systems would have to be developed, which could prove to be costly. Irrigation may also limit the availability of water to human and wildlife. Another disadvantage of biofuels is the economic cost. Biomass energy isn't free. The process of converting biomass materials into alcohols and gases when it is to be used as alternative fuel source to oils and gasoline requires costly, specialized facilities and machines. Additionally, it costs money to produce the organic materials that constitute biomass. Farmland must be tended, fertilized, and harvested. Harvesting crops like corn and soybeans, which are used to feed livestock, can drive up the cost of feed, according to the NRDC. These issues, if unresolved, make biomass an economically inefficient form of energy.
I'm Jack Fiala, CEO. Another disadvantage to biofuels is the energy expenditure. In addition to using up dollars, biomass requires a significant energy investment during the production and processing phases that might outweigh the amount of energy it can produce as a fuel source. For example, fertilizers, even organic fertilizers, still require processing before they can be applied to crops. Maintaining crops and animals also requires a significant amount of human energy and traditional fuels for powering farm equipment. Furthermore, organic matter requires time to replenish. According to Conserve Energy Future, Using lumber as a biomass source requires the entire wooded areas to be cleared. These areas will then need years to grow back to a density suitable for fuel use, or even use as wildlife habitats. Next disadvantage is the environmental impacts. Displacement of wildlife by deforestation is only one environmental consequence of biomass fuel production. With current technology, biomass may do more harm to the environment than it does to help. According to the NRDC, burning lumber releases carbon into the atmosphere and reduces carbon sink size through deforestation. A carbon sink absorbs more carbon than it releases. Deforestation lowers the number of trees that can extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and contributes to global warming. Land use for bioenergy production may not be sustainable. Producing large amounts of plant matter for fuel can result in over-farming and leave wild swaths of land barren for long periods of time. Available space is another concern when considering biomass as a primary fuel source. Combustion facilities will need to be built a considerable distance from residential areas. Also, biomass requires new farmland that will be used strictly for growing fuel crops. This need for land raises an important issue because the human population is constantly growing, and the need for food crops will only rise. The decision as to allocate new farmland for fuel instead of food when alternatives for fuel exist becomes increasingly difficult to justify. A disadvantage of biofuels is the fact that many countries around the world cannot afford to stop growing all of their food crops and turn them into biomass farms. This kind of transformation will cause a great deal of damage to the global economy, as many countries rely on their exports of crop and food to feed their economy. Since the U.S. is the most dominant producer of biofuels, the idea that all other countries around the world could keep up with U.S. production is not realistic. The U.S. having the #1 GDP in the world means that we can afford to allocate a lot of our resources into biofuels, whereas many other countries cannot. Another major deterrent in implementing biofuels on a wide-scale level are the environmental policies of the Trump administration. Trump's environmental agenda includes legislation that proposes reduction of climate change regulations, major budget cuts to the EPA, and review of fuel economy standards. The Trump administration is against biofuels such as ethanol. The renewable fuel standard is a long-standing policy that requires fuel companies to use increasing amounts of biofuel blended with the nation's gasoline and diesel supply. Trump is looking to repeal these renewable fuel standards, and by doing so, less biofuel will be used, dissolving the industry. This new fiscal policy has already had an effect on the biofuel market. The administration says that the ultimate goal of repealing this program is to free up the market by getting rid of the mandate and letting competition fill the void. This makes the main competitor of the biofuel industry, the oil industry, very excited because it allows them to continue to thrive.
It wasn't long ago that biofuels were heralded as the alternative fuel of the future. Renewable, sustainable, said to release less carbon than gasoline, biofuels seem to check all the green boxes, an apparent ideal solution to the pressing global problems of energy supply and climate change.
The idea behind biofuels is that if you're burning biofuels in your car, you're going to be burning less carbon per mile than you are if you're burning petrol.
But what seemed to be a panacea turned into a problem. Biofuel production is now being blamed for raising food prices, increasing poverty, and even adding to global warming.
In the end, you have to be able to answer the question, are the biofuels we're putting into our petrol tank better for the climate or worse compared with the petrol and the diesel they're replacing? And it isn't quite as straightforward as people thought, the environmental movement thought 5 or 6 years ago.
Most countries have jumped on the biofuel bandwagon. Europe grows mostly rapeseed, wheat, and sugar beets. Brazil produces sugar cane, and Southeast Asia grows palm trees to make high-grade oil. In the U.S., corn and soybeans are turned into ethanol.
Someday you're going to be using this in your cars.
President Bush signed an energy bill that calls for refiners to replace 36 billion gallons of gasoline with ethanol by 2020, up from about 7 billion gallons today. Europe set the same deadline to replace 10% of its transport fuel.
G8 countries are paying out millions of dollars in subsidies to farmers to grow biofuels.
Subsidies which encourage farmers to grow crops for fuel instead of food. A confidential World Bank report leaked to a British newspaper estimates that the growth in biofuel crops has been responsible for 75% of the rise in food prices in the past 6 years.
Nobody anticipated the effect that biofuel production has had on food prices.
Now, the UK government, backed by a British study, has put the brakes on biofuel production.
They are, in fact, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that occur, and they are also increasing food prices. And we believe, until these effects are better understood, we should slow down on our growth in biofuels.
The environmental benefits of biofuels are also coming under attack. Unlike fossil fuels, biofuels have the potential to be carbon neutral because they absorb carbon dioxide when they grow, offsetting the carbons they release when burned. But growing them takes energy, fertilizers and pesticides, often made from conventional oil. And the machines used in seeding, harvesting and processing use gasoline and electricity.
By the time you actually factor in all those things, you're sometimes using, in fact, more carbon to power your car on biofuels than you were on if you were just burning petrol in the tank.
The Energy Policy Act of 2005 used a variety of economic incentives, including grants, income tax credits, subsidies, and loans to promote biofuel research and development. It established a renewable fuel standard mandating the blending of 7.5 billion gallons of renewable fuels with gasoline annually by 2012. The Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 included similar economic incentives. EISA expanded the renewable fuel standard to increase the biofuel production to 36 billion gallons by 2022. Of the latter goal, 21 billion gallons must come from the cellulosic biofuel or advanced biofuels derived from feedstocks other than cornstarch. To limit GHG emissions, the Act states that conventional renewable fuels are required to reduce life cycle GHG emissions relative to life cycle emissions from fossil fuels by at least 20%. Biodiesel and advanced biofuels must reduce GHG emissions by 50%, and cellulosic biofuels must reduce emissions by 60%. EISA also provides cash awards, grants, subsidies, and loans for research and development. Biorefineries that displace more than 80% of fossil fuels used to operate the refinery and commercial applications of cellulosic biofuel. In addition to EISA, numerous other policies have encouraged the production to use of biofuels in the U.S. in recent decades. Tax credits currently support advanced biofuels, including cellulosic and